words of power because we are kings and our words matter. The new covenant is better than the old covenant. You know why? Because Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. The curse over us has been cancelled. Nobody shouting curses from the mountain of curses now. Every church pulpit ought to be a mountain of blessing, where blessing is spoken every Sunday. Curses are gone. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law.
In times like and griefs are solid rock is Jesus. Yes, He's the one. This rock is Jesus, the only one. Be very sure, be very sure. Solid rock. In times like these, you need a Savior. In times like these, you need an anchor. Be very sure. Be very sure. Your anchor holds, and griefs are solid rock. This rock is Jesus. Yes, He's the one. This rock is Jesus, the only one. Be very sure, be very sure. Your anchor holds, and grips the solid rock.
Sam Chelladurai invites you to a special pastor seminar at AFT Chennai on the 20th, 21st and 22nd of January 2016 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please note that all messages will be in Tamil only. Prior registration with a fee of Rs 700 is required. You can register online at www.revsam.org or you can call us at the numbers on the screen. We look forward to seeing you there.
Today, sometimes you find in the wedding ceremonies, they have communion. And have you ever wondered why they have communion? You know, some people think it's just a tradition in some churches that they have communion. But it has a meaning. What they're saying is that the wedding is not just a legal thing, where by the law of the state, you're joined together as husband and wife with two witnesses and you signing. Two witnesses and you signing satisfies the law of the state. You become husband and wife. But the wedding in the eyes of God is much more than that. It is a covenant. It is not just a legal contract. It is a covenant. Because it is a covenant, they ask you to lift the cup together. They ask you to take the bread and eat it together and lift the cup together, because you are not only just becoming partners together in a legal contract, you are bound together by a covenant which cannot be broken. A blood covenant. A blood covenant that was put into effect by the cross of Calvary through Jesus Christ, and you take the cup that signifies that blood covenant, and you say, I enter into a covenant like that with you. Now, then there is no place for separation, no place for divorce, no place to say you go to your mother's house and I'll go to my mother's house and all that nonsense, Once you do that, you're bound by a covenant. Whether you like or not, you stay together. And better start liking one another and working out things with one another and do something to make it work. There is no way out because it is a covenant relationship. It is like a blood covenant. That is why they have the communion, even though it is not explained in so many words, People just drink the cup and, eat the bread and you go through the ceremony, don't understand what it means, but actually this is what it means, Back in the old days, they say even the ring came from that kind of a practice, where nowadays we conveniently just wear a ring. And if it's a ring, sometimes if your wife doesn't like you, I've seen in some countries, they'll just take the ring and throw it in your face and say, get out of here, you and your ring, It can happen to you sometimes. I'm afraid that it happens in India also sometimes. Very easy to take the ring and throw it. But you know how the ring came? They say in those days, when they cut the covenant, they made an incision like a ring in the ring finger. When they made incisions in those days, they say they put gunpowder so that the place where the incision was made, the mark is pronounced. It is prominent. It will be seen. It will look like a ring where they cut you. I think it's better to do that even today. You can't leave that ring at home. Some guys take their ring and put it in their pocket when they go to some parties, because they want to look like they're unmarried, You can never get rid of that ring because that is a permanent mark on your body, you see. That has now become a ring where we conveniently take it off and put it back, and when you throw your ring at the face of your husband, he goes and marries another one and gives the same ring to that one, Save some money, It means very little these days, Marriage has lost its meaning. Marriage has become just an ordinary legal contract that you can cancel any time that you don't like, and so on, because people have failed to understand that it is a covenant. Marriage is a covenant and not just a legal contract. Now, there are some interesting historical stories about the sacredness of the blood covenant as practiced by people everywhere in the world. I'm sure you've heard about David Livingstone, who worked in Africa. And there was another man named Stanley who went looking for him, back in the 1800s. In the 1800s, you can't just go to Google and Google the guy, if you're looking for the guy. It's very difficult to look for a guy. So when Stanley and Livingstone went into Africa and Stanley went looking for him, it was a big exploration and had to go through a lot of trouble and found out many things. And they talk about, one thing that they talk about in their explorations of Africa is about the blood covenant. They talk about it with wonder. These British men, they could hardly understand why this covenant meant so much for the African people, They were in amazement about why this covenant meant so much to the African people. They say, both of them say, that they've never found one man in Africa who has ever broken a blood covenant. Not one man. If he was ever there, he will not be living today. If he broke the covenant, he'll be dead, That's the way it is. Blood covenant was a serious business. It was very sacred. The vilest enemies became closest friends, most trusted friends, as soon as the covenant is cut. No man takes advantage of the covenant or breaks it. It is so sacred that the children to the third and fourth generations revere it and keep it. It was a perpetual covenant. It was indissoluble. And a covenant that cannot be annulled, cannot be cancelled. It cannot be dissolved. It cannot be cancelled. This is what they say about it. And they are in wonder about it. They talk about it with wonder about their exploration. The thing about the covenant is the most prominent thing about their discovery that they made about Africa, the blood covenant. Now, if you read Stanley's stories about how he went to look for Livingston, he talks about all the problems he had. First of all, when he set out to go looking for the man, he went out with a few others, because he couldn't go alone. He carried some things because they had to sell some things to make some money, to buy some food, and you have to find a living also, make a living also on the way, because it takes months and months and years to explore and to find out. So when they went, they found out that every step was a hurdle to them. Everywhere they went, there were tribes that were hostile, that were warlike, that always wanted to fight them, stop them, did not want to cooperate with them, did not want to help them, and so on. They will leave the stuff there, somebody will steal half of the stuff, You turn this way, by the time some of the things will be stolen, Always somebody has to watch over their stuff. They were looting their stuff and stealing their stuff and not cooperating and always working against them and so on. So there was an interpreter with him who was an African, educated in England. He knew both customs. And he told Stanley, finally, he said, "Why don't you make a blood covenant?" And Stanley did not understand the significance of the blood covenant as it was practiced in Africa. He said, "What do you mean blood covenant? What does it mean? What should I do in order to make a blood covenant?" He said, "You got to drink one another's blood." He said, "No, not me. I'm an Englishman. I don't drink nobody's blood, We're civilized people. We don't practice such things, and we won't do such things." So he refused to do that and went on trying to explore and trying to find Livingston and met with failure after failure after failure. And finally they met with a very horrible tribe where the chieftain was a very horrible man, and they could not handle him. And finally this man, the interpreter, again told him, "I'm telling you, Stanley, make a blood covenant, then you'll find some favor." Stanley looked at him and said, "Tell me, what is the benefit of the blood covenant? What will blood covenant get to me? How will I benefit from a blood covenant?" And that man looked up to him and said, "When you make a blood covenant with that chief, that terrible fellow, everything that he has will become yours." Then Stanley started thinking. He said, "My goodness, everything that guy has will become mine? That's a good deal. That's what I want. I want his fullest cooperation. I want his favor. I want everything from him. So let's make the blood covenant," they said. So they decided to make the blood covenant. There were two groups. One is Stanley's group. The other is the other tribe with the tribal chief and all of that. They had to choose a representative. So they chose a representative. Stanley chose a representative and put him up. And the other man, the chieftain, chose a representative and he put him up also. Those two people are going to now cut the covenant. Before it happened, the first session was, Stanley was questioned. "Who are you?" the chief asked. "Where are you coming from? What kind of a man are you? Are you going to be able to keep the covenant? Are you going to be faithful and truthful to this?" He examined him thoroughly. And then after he was satisfied, then there was an exchanging of gifts. And Stanley was a very naive person, he didn't know anything about this. So he just looked over and saw some of the stuff that these Africans had, and he said, "All right, I'll take that and I'll take this," and so on. And they were ready to give him that. But the chieftain was a very clever guy. He's a very experienced guy in making covenants. He looked over and he found that this man had a nice white goat. Now the reason he had a white goat, Stanley had a white goat, was he could not eat the African food. So he had a stomach ulcer. The only thing that he could eat now was goat's milk. So he got a goat and carried it everywhere and milked it and drank its milk. That was his only food that he can eat. And the chieftain understood that this meant so much for Stanley, and he said, "I want that." And the guy told the interpreter, tell him to ask for anything else, man. Tell him that my stomach can't take their food and I need this goat, and this goat's milk is the only thing that I can eat, I can't give this goat, I'll give anything else. I got so much stuff. Why don't you want this trinket? And why don't you want these clothes? Why can't you want this, all this stuff that I got? Why do you want the goat? He said, because that goat is your life. Because that goat is so important to you, I want it. You want to make a covenant with me, you give me the thing that matters to you most. Give it to me, he said. Finally, the interpreter said, you better give him the goat because the guy won't leave you without giving the goat. It's not going to happen. Give it to him. So finally, he gave the goat, Here goes his food, Gave the goat to the guy. And the guy was happy to get the goat. And he turned around and he took a stick wound with copper wire and gave it to Stanley. And Stanley looked at the interpreter and said, this is what I get for a goat? A stick? Man, these Africans are giving me a very bad deal, I just get a stick and he gets my goat, he gets my food and I just get a stick. But he came to understand how powerful the stick was when he began to travel with that stick and entered into tribe after tribe, among people after people. Whenever they saw this stick, everybody bowed before him and everybody submitted to him. Because when they saw that stick, they understood this man is that man's covenant partner. That much power the covenant had, the covenant symbols had. So they went through the whole process. They drank blood and all of that stuff, and the priest made the incision, and they were made to drink the wine with the drops of blood in it and all of that. And the places where they made the incision, gunpowder was put so that the incision remained very prominent and so on. And then they planted trees, and then they were declared as blood brothers. As soon as they were declared as blood brothers, the chieftain came forward, it seems, and called upon the people with a loud voice and said, come over here. Now you can trade with Stanley. You can do business with Stanley. You can cooperate with him and show him utmost favor. Whatever he needs from among us, he can get it. And he is our covenant brother. As soon as that was done, business picked up. Stanley could sell his goods. Stanley could keep his goods. He said before, if he just turned this way, something will be missing here. You got to always keep your hand on the stuff, You can't leave it. That's the way it was, it seems. Now, he could leave it there and go and come back a few hours later. Not one little pin will be missing, because if a man ever stole from a covenant partner, he will be put to death. They honored the blood covenant. It turned the people into such good people, all of a sudden, the covenant. It turned them into such good-natured people towards their covenant partners. And Stanley was surprised at that, what effect the covenant had, The stick had so much power. Wherever he went, people respected him. And now everybody cooperated, bought his stuff, and they welcomed him everywhere, showed him favor everywhere, and so on. The chief, couldn't do enough for his newfound covenant brother, And Stanley writes with wonder about this whole thing. About this whole blood covenant. He just could not relate that to what is in the Bible, the cross and Jesus Christ and the new covenant and all of that. But he was in wonder about the blood covenant. Why is this blood covenant so respected? But I'm telling you, blood covenant was one of the oldest methods that was there. Probably originated by God himself in the Garden of Eden. Twisted and turned and made ugly by others in so many ways. But in its original form, it meant something very divine and very good and so on. It had very wonderful things in it. And our entire Christian faith is based on this teaching of the blood covenant, on this thing about the blood covenant. The Bible is called, we call it the Bible. It says Bible, right? But actually, it is a covenant. It is Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The word testament literally means covenant. If you said Old Covenant and New Covenant, it'll be right. It is a covenant. Every word in it is covenant word. It is based on the covenant. See, when they made the covenant, when Stanley and this other guy made the covenant, one thing I left out, one important feature of that covenant was after everything was over, after the drinking of the blood and all those things are over, one of the guys from the chieftain, his representative stood up and just spoke curses looking at Stanley. Spoke something like, if you ever violate this covenant, may you and your descendants die of ringworms around your nose or something like that, just some terrible stuff, I mean, just curse them out like anything. If you ever violate this thing, you and your descendants will go to nothing, that's what it amounted to. He cursed them out in so many words, and he couldn't understand. He looked at the interpreter and said, what is this guy saying? He said, he's cursing you. He's speaking curses over you. He said, why is he speaking curses over me? I'm a covenant partner. He says, because these are called the curses of the covenant. Anytime you violate the covenant, these curses will come upon you. It has to be spoken. And as soon as that was over, another guy stepped up and he spoke the blessings of the covenant. Now you say that is very strange, but that is in the Bible. Have you ever read Deuteronomy chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 17? God said, when you get to the promised land, to the land of Canaan that I will give you, every year you should go, from the mountain of cursing, you must speak the curses. From the mountain of blessing, you must speak the blessing. There was a mountain for cursing. And there is a mountain for blessing. From the mountain of cursing, you speak curses. That sounds strange, isn't it? That sounds like, my God, what is this, But if you understand the covenant, it is very, very, very easy to understand what it is all about. From the mountain of cursing, you speak the cursing over the people. Speak the curses that will come upon them if they will ever violate the covenant, because they are covenant people. Israelites were covenant people. From the mount of blessing, you speak the blessing over the people, because these are the blessings that are promised in the covenant if you'll keep the covenant. Now, when we come to the new covenant, when I teach on the new covenant, I'll show you how the new covenant is a better covenant than the old covenant. You know why the new covenant is a better? I'll give you a foretaste of what is going to come. You know why the new covenant is a better covenant? It is a better covenant because Galatians chapter 3 verse 13 says that Christ died on the cross, being made a curse for us, and by hanging on the cross and being made a curse for us, he delivered us from the curse of the law. Turn to it and read it, because, it is such an important statement that Paul makes there. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13. Christ has redeemed us. Everybody say redeemed us. Christ has done something. What has he done? He has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree. By hanging on the tree, he became the cursed one and redeemed us from the curse of the law. So I say to you, the new covenant is a better covenant than the old covenant. The new covenant is better than the old covenant. You know why? Because Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. The curse over us has been cancelled. Nobody shouting curses from the mountain of curses now. Every church pulpit ought to be a mountain of blessing, where blessing is spoken every Sunday. Curses are gone. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah. So clap our hands. Hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, love is amazing, steady and unchanging. Your love is a mountain from beneath my feet. Your love is a mystery, how you gently lift me when I am surrounded. Your love carries me. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Your love is surprising, I can feel it rising. Oh, the joy that's growing deep inside of me. Every time I see you, oh, your goodness shines through. I can feel this God song rising up in me. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing it again. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Your love is amazing, steady and unchanging. Your love is a mountain from beneath our feet. Your love is a mystery, how you gently lift me when I am surrounded. Your love carries me. Makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Everybody, your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Your love makes me sing. Hallelujah, hallelujah,